I found Dr. Julian Voss hanging from the fire escape outside Building 47 at Goddard Space Flight Center, 3 days after the project was officially discontinued. The police ruled it suicide. His wife said he'd been drinking heavily, hadn't slept in weeks. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her that Julian never drank, that he was allergic to alcohol, that the tremor in his hands during our last conversation wasn't withdrawal, but something far worse. The involuntary response of a nervous system trying to process information it wasn't built to handle. My name is Dr. Cameron Holt, and until 16 days ago, I was the lead data analyst for NASA's Temporal Observation Project. Now I'm nobody. My credentials have been scrubbed from every database, my publications pulled from journals, my apartment lease mysteriously terminated. I'm writing this from a motel outside Greenbelt, Maryland, because it's the only place I could find that still takes cash and doesn't ask questions about the smell of ozone that seems to follow me everywhere now. The first successful test of NASA's Temporal Observation Portal happened on April 3, 2024, in a converted clean room beneath Building 47. I was there. I watched the initialization sequence, saw the air inside the observation chamber fold in on itself like origami made from reality. Dr. Amelia Saunders, project lead, my mentor, the woman who dedicated 15 years to making this possible, stood beside the main console with tears streaming down her face. She was smiling. God help us, we were all smiling. The parameters were simple. Show us April 3rd, 2029, exactly 5 years ahead, same location, same time of day. What could go wrong with looking? We weren't changing anything, just observing, like watching a movie of tomorrow. The portal stabilized at 2:17 p.m. The image clarified, and Amelia stopped smiling. Building 47 was still there in the future view. The parking lot outside was pristine, recently paved. The trees had grown. Everything looked normal except for one detail. The parking lot was completely empty. No cars, no people, not a single soul visible through any of the windows. Julian suggested we expand the view. We did. Goddard Space Flight Center, 5 years ahead, looked like a movie set waiting for actors who would never arrive. Every building intact, every light on, nobody home. That's when Amelia made the decision that doomed us all. "Show me Washington, D.C., she whispered. "Show me the city." The portal's view swept across the Capitol, and that's when we understood that something had gone catastrophically, impossibly wrong. Not with our experiment, but with the future itself. The DC skyline materialized in the portal's view with perfect clarity. The Washington Monument stood tall against an April sky that looked exactly as it should. Clear, slightly hazy with spring humidity, the kind of day tourists love. The Capitol building gleamed white in the distance. Traffic lights cycled through their patterns along Pennsylvania Avenue. But the streets were empty. Not abandoned empty, not disaster empty. Just empty. Like someone had pressed pause on the entire city and removed every single person while leaving everything else untouched. A metro bus sat at a stop near the National Mall, doors open, engine presumably running based on the exhaust vapor visible in the morning air. No driver, no passengers, no one waiting at the shelter. "Malfunction," Dr. Raymond Booth said from his station near the back. He was our chief engineer, a man who fixed problems with his hands and trusted math more than intuition. "Has to be. The portal's reading environmental data but missing biological signatures." "That's not how it works," Julian said quietly. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "The portal doesn't discriminate. It shows what's there. If there were people, we'd see them." Amelia was already typing commands into her terminal, her fingers moving with the kind of manic precision that comes right before a breakdown or a breakthrough. Expanding search radius, Pentagon, Arlington, Alexandria. Each location rendered perfectly, each location completely devoid of human life. The Pentagon's parking lot held hundreds of cars, all neatly arranged, but no one walking to or from them. A coffee shop in Old Town Alexandria had its lights on, tables set, a sandwich sitting on a counter as if waiting for someone to pick it up. Through the front window, we could see the cash register screen glowing. "Maybe it's a holiday," Booth offered, but his voice cracked. Some future holiday we don't know about where everyone stays inside. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that. But something in my gut knew we were seeing exactly what we feared. A future where humanity had somehow ceased to exist, while our civilization continued running like a car left in neutral. Try a residential area, I said. Show me my own neighborhood. Amelia glanced at me, and I saw my own dread reflected in her eyes. But she entered the coordinates anyway. My apartment building in Silver Spring appeared in the portal, and I felt something inside me twist sideways. The building looked newer, recently painted, the landscaping had been updated, but my balcony, the one where I'd spent countless evenings grading papers and watching sunsets, was empty except for a plant I didn't recognize. Try another date, Julian suggested. His hands were shaking now, just slightly. Maybe this particular day was evacuated. Show us April 4th, 2029. The portal flickered, adjusted. Same scene, same emptiness. April 10th, empty. May 1st, empty. Amelia's voice was barely audible. How far ahead can we look? The portal's theoretical maximum was 100 years, though we'd never tested beyond a decade. The computational power required increased exponentially with distance. Booth was already shaking his head. The system isn't calibrated for... How far? Amelia repeated. 10 years, Booth said. Maybe 20 if we're lucky, and don't mind if the whole thing melts down. Do it. Show me 2044, same location. The portal strained, and I could hear the cooling systems kick into overdrive beneath us. The image destabilized, pixelated, then clarified. April 3rd, 2044, 20 years ahead. My apartment building was gone. In its place stood something that looked like a park. Carefully maintained grass, walking paths, benches. And sitting on one of those benches was a figure. For a moment, hope surged through me. Someone was there. Humanity had survived. But then the figure moved, and I realized with creeping horror that something about its proportions was wrong. The arms too long. The neck bent at an angle that should have been impossible. Zoom in, Julian whispered. Amelia's hand hovered over the control. Are you sure? I need to see. The image expanded, focused. The thing on the bench turned its head toward us, toward the exact point in space-time where our observation was focused, and I saw its face. It wasn't a face, it was a mask. Human skin stretched over something that had never been born from a human mother. The eyes underneath didn't align with the eye holes. There were too many of them, shifting behind the flesh like fish under ice. Its mouth opened, and I could see the skin stretching, tearing slightly at the corners, revealing something underneath that my brain refused to process. Booth vomited. The sound echoed in the observation chamber. Julian stepped back from his console, and I watched his hands go from shaking to completely still, the stillness of someone in shock. The thing stood up. It was wearing clothes, a jacket and pants that looked human, contemporary even. But the way it moved, the way its limbs bent and flexed, suggested bones that weren't made from calcium and joints that worked on principles physics hadn't discovered yet. Behind it, I could see others, dozens of them walking through the park that used to be my neighborhood, all wearing human skin, all moving with that same wrong gait. Shut it down, Amelia said. Her voice was dead calm, the kind of calm that comes after every emotion has been burned away. Shut down the portal. Now. But I was still staring at the screen, at those things wearing us, and I noticed something carved into the bench where the first one had been sitting. Letters scratched deep into the wood, clearly visible even from the portal's distant viewpoint. Thank you for leaving everything so clean. That's when the figure looked directly at the observation point and smiled with a mouthful of teeth that had never known a dentist's drill. The emergency shutdown took 47 seconds. It felt like hours. During that time, the thing in the park kept staring at our observation point, kept smiling with those impossible teeth. When the portal finally collapsed, the sudden absence of its hum left a silence so complete I could hear Booth dry heaving in the corner. It saw us, Julian said. He was sitting on the floor now, back against his console. It looked right at the observation point. How could it know where we were looking from? It couldn't, Amelia said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was pulling up logs, double-checking data, doing what she always did when confronted with the impossible, retreating into numbers and protocols. The portal is purely observational. We're not projecting anything. There's no way for something in the observed time frame to detect the observation itself. Then explain what we just saw. Nobody could. We stood there in that converted clean room, surrounded by millions of dollars in equipment that had just shown us our own extinction, and nobody had a single damn explanation. We need to document this, I said finally. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, too steady, like I was reading from a script. We need to record everything, compile the data, and present it to Director Kashani immediately. Present what exactly? Booth wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His face had gone grey. That we looked 20 years ahead and saw monsters wearing people. They'll think we had a collective psychotic break. We have video, Julian said. The portal recorded everything. Amelia was already shaking her head. The recordings are classified. The moment we show them to anyone outside this room, we lose control of the narrative. You know how this works, Cameron. You've seen how NASA handles controversial data. She was right, and I hated that she was right. I'd watched the agency bury findings before, seen promising research quietly defunded when it threatened to raise uncomfortable questions or public panic. But this wasn't some anomalous telescope reading or questionable satellite imagery. This was proof that humanity was going to disappear, and something else was going to take our place. We can't just sit on this, I said. We're not going to. Amelia pulled up a new interface on her terminal. We're going to gather more data. We need to know when it happens, how it happens, if there's any way to prevent it. You want to keep looking, Booth's voice cracked, after what we just saw. Especially after what we just saw. Right now, we have one data point from 20 years ahead. We need to establish a timeline. Find the exact moment when humanity disappears. That's the only way we can hope to understand it. Julian stood up slowly, steadying himself against the console. She's right. If we shut down now, we learn nothing. And if we learn nothing, we can't warn anyone, can't prepare, can't what? I interrupted. Can't stop it. You saw those things, Julian. You saw what's waiting for us. What makes you think this is something we can prevent? The question hung in the air between us. Outside the observation chamber, I could hear the normal sounds of Goddard, footsteps in hallways, distant conversations, the hum of ventilation systems, people going about their work, completely unaware that their future selves had been replaced by something wearing their faces like masks. We have to try, Amelia said quietly. That's what we do. That's what science is for, to understand the incomprehensible and find solutions to the impossible. I wanted to argue, but looking at her face, I saw the same desperate determination I'd seen when she pitched this project 5 years ago. The same stubborn refusal to accept that some things couldn't be solved with enough data and the right equations. It was that quality that had made the portal possible in the first place. Fine, I said, but we do this systematically. Small jumps backward from 2044, establish when the population disappears, document everything, and then we decide together what to do with the information. We spent the next 6 hours mapping the future. We started with 2043, then 2042, working our way backward through time like archaeologists excavating in reverse. Each date showed the same thing, Earth occupied by those skin-wearing things, going about some incomprehensible routine that mimicked human civilization without understanding it. They drove cars, though the vehicles often crashed because the things' reaction times were wrong. They entered buildings, though sometimes they'd walk straight into walls as if depth perception was a concept they hadn't quite mastered. And everywhere, in every city we checked, across every continent, they left the same message carved into surfaces. Thank you for leaving everything so clean. It was 11 p.m. when we finally found the boundary. November 18th, 2024. Earth was still populated, still human, still ours. People walked the streets, lived their lives, completely unaware of what was coming. November 19th, 2024, the world was empty. That's 7 months from now, Booth said. He'd recovered somewhat, though his hands still trembled when he typed. 7 months and 16 days. Show me November 19th, Amelia ordered. Beginning of day, 12:01 a.m. The portal recalibrated. The image showed Times Square in New York, still the best place to see if humanity was present or absent. At 12:01 a.m., the square was crowded with people. Not as many as New Year's Eve, but still plenty of late-night tourists, workers, insomniacs. Move forward. Slowly. The time display advanced. 3 a.m., still people present. 6 a.m., early commuters beginning to appear. 9 a.m., the square filling with the morning crowd. Everything looked normal. Everything looked like a regular Tuesday in New York. Then, at 1:47 p.m., every person in Times Square stopped moving. Not gradually, not with any warning. One moment they were walking, talking, living. The next, they all froze simultaneously, like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. Hundreds of people, all perfectly still, all looking up at the sky. "What are they looking at?" Julian whispered. Amelia adjusted the portal's angle, tilting the view upward. At first, I saw only sky, the usual grey-blue haze of a New York afternoon. Then the sky began to change. Not darken or brighten, but fold. Like fabric being gathered by invisible hands, the sky creased and wrinkled, and through the gaps between the folds, I caught glimpses of something vast. I can't describe what I saw there. My brain keeps trying to interpret it as colours or shapes or patterns, but none of those words fit. It was like looking at a new dimension that human eyes weren't designed to perceive, and the act of viewing it made my head throb with a pain that felt suspiciously like understanding something I desperately didn't want to understand. The people in Times Square began to move again, but not like themselves. They walked with perfect synchronization toward the center of the square, gathering in clusters, and then, impossibly, horribly, they began to rise. Not jumping, not flying, simply defying gravity as if it had stopped applying to human bodies specifically. They ascended slowly, arms at their sides, faces still turned toward that folded sky. Within minutes, hundreds of people had floated out of view, up into whatever waited beyond the atmosphere. "Check other locations," Amelia said. Her voice had gone flat, mechanical. "London, Tokyo, Sydney." We did. The same scene played out everywhere, with minor variations in timing. At precisely 1:47 p.m. Eastern Time, which translated to different local hours across the globe, every human being on Earth stopped, looked up, and then began their ascent. The portal showed us families rising together from suburban backyards, office workers floating up from skyscrapers, drivers abandoning cars that coasted to gentle stops. The process took 4 hours and 12 minutes. By 6 p.m. Eastern Time on November 19th, 2024, Earth was empty of human life. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible question formed. What if they weren't taken? What if they went willingly? We watched the recording 17 times before anyone spoke again. Each viewing made it worse, not better. The human mind wants patterns, wants explanations, and what we'd witnessed offered neither. Just the simple, terrible fact of an entire species walking voluntarily into oblivion. "We need to tell someone," Booth finally said. It was 3 a.m. We'd been in the observation chamber for nearly 13 hours straight. The president, the UN, someone who can actually do something about this. And tell them what? Julian had his head in his hands. That in 7 months, the sky is going to open up and everyone's going to float away. They'll institutionalize us. Then we show them the recordings. Which are classified, Amelia reminded him. The moment those leave this facility without proper authorization, we're all in federal prison, and the data would be confiscated anyway, buried under national security protocols before anyone important ever saw it. I stood up, my legs protesting after hours in the same chair. My back ached, my eyes burned from staring at monitors. But more than physical discomfort, I felt a growing sense of unreality, like I'd stepped outside normal cause and effect and was watching myself from a distance. There has to be something we're missing. Some detail that explains this. Explains people floating into the sky? Booth laughed, but it came out wrong, edged with hysteria. There's no explanation for that, Cameron. We just watched the rapture happen, except there's no God involved, just something so far beyond us that we can't even perceive it properly. Don't, Amelia's voice cut through the chamber. Don't start with supernatural explanations. We're scientists. We deal in observable phenomena and testable hypotheses. Then explain it scientifically, Booth challenged. Explain how gravity stops applying to biological matter. Explain what that thing in the sky was. I can't. Not yet, but that doesn't mean... The lights flickered, just for a second, barely noticeable, but in the sudden darkness, I saw something. The portal's observation chamber wasn't completely shut down. A faint glow emanated from the viewing screen, too dim to illuminate anything, but definitely there. Did anyone leave the system active? I asked. Amelia was already moving toward the main console. No, I initiated full shutdown protocols. The portal should be completely dormant. Then why is it still glowing? We gathered around the viewing screen. The glow intensified slowly, and I realized we were seeing an image forming. Grainy, unstable, but definitely an image. Not from our input commands, from somewhere else. Is it feedback? Julian suggested. Some kind of temporal echo from our earlier observations. That's not how the portal works. Amelia's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up diagnostic readings. The observation system is passive. It can't receive transmissions. It's not a camera or a communication device. But the image continued to clarify. We were looking at the interior of the observation chamber, our observation chamber, except the timestamp in the corner read November 19th, 2024, 1:46 p.m., 7 months ahead. In the image, 4 people stood around the viewing screen, just as we were standing now. I recognized them immediately. Amelia, Julian, Booth, and myself, our future selves, watching something on the portal's display. This is impossible, Booth whispered. We're being shown a future observation of us observing the future. Future Amelia typed something on her console. The image she was viewing became visible. Times Square, 1 minute before the sky opened. She looked terrified, tears streaming down her face. Future Julian stood with his arms crossed, staring at the screen with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Resignation. Acceptance. Future me turned suddenly, looking directly at the observation point, looking at us, watching from 7 months in the past. His mouth moved, forming words, but there was no audio. I could read his lips, though, could understand exactly what he was trying to tell us. Get out. Leave the building. Don't be here when it happens. What does that mean? Booth backed away from the screen. Why wouldn't we be here? This is Goddard. It's one of the most secure facilities in the country. If something's coming, this is where we should be. But I was still watching future me, watching the desperation in his eyes. He mouthed something else, something longer that I couldn't quite make out. Then the image flickered and the view shifted. We were looking at the parking lot outside Building 47. November 19th, 2024, 1:47 p.m. The sky above Goddard began to fold, exactly as we'd seen it do over Times Square. People emerged from the buildings, drawn by some invisible summons, and began gathering in the open spaces. I saw future Amelia walking toward the gathering crowd, her movements jerky, fighting against something. Future Julian was already there, arms at his sides, face turned skyward. Future Booth stumbled out of Building 47, fell to his knees, then forced himself to stand and join the others. But future me wasn't there. The image panned across the parking lot, searching, and found the main entrance to Building 47. The door hung open, and through that door, I could see down the corridor that led to the observation chamber. Something was wrong with the corridor. The walls had a dark, organic quality to them, as if they'd been grown rather than built. And moving through that impossible hallway was future me, running, but his body was wrong. His proportions had changed. His arms were too long. His skin looked loose, like it didn't quite fit. He reached the observation chamber door and looked back toward the camera, toward us, and I saw that his face was still human, but underneath, behind his eyes, something else looked out. Something that had learned to wear a person but hadn't quite perfected the technique. "Oh God," Julian said. "That's not you. That's one of them. They got to you before the ascension happened." The image flickered again, and this time we saw the interior of the observation chamber on November 19th. The walls were covered in that same organic growth. The portal was still active, but its screen showed something I couldn't quite make out. Geometry that hurt to look at, angles that seemed to fold in on themselves. And standing in front of the portal was the thing wearing future me. It had shed the pretense now. The human skin hung loose around its frame like an oversized coat. Underneath, I could see what it really was. Something composed of parts that had no business fitting together, held in a shape that violated every principle of biology I understood. It reached toward the portal with appendages that terminated in too many fingers, and the screen erupted with light. Not the normal observation glow, but something aggressive, invasive. The light spread through the chamber, and where it touched the walls, they began to transform. Metal became flesh. Concrete became something that pulsed. "It's using the portal," Amelia said, her voice barely audible. "Not to observe. To transmit. To send something back to..." The viewing screen went dark. Not a gradual fade, but an instant cut-off, like a circuit breaker had been thrown. The observation chamber's emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. "Someone cut the power," Booth said. "Someone?" Julian pointed at the main console. "Look at the logs." Amelia pulled them up, and I saw immediately what he meant. The shutdown command had come from within the system, but not from any of our terminals. The timestamp showed it had been executed 3 seconds before it appeared in our records. A temporal impossibility that suggested the command had come from the future itself. And attached to the shutdown was a message, text only, no signature. "They know you've seen them. They know you're planning to warn everyone. The portal has created a bridge, and they're learning to use it. Every time you look forward, you make the path wider. Discontinue all observations immediately, destroy the hardware, forget what you've seen. This is your only chance." "Who sent this?" Booth demanded. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know." Amelia scrolled through the message headers, searching for origin data. "The routing is scrambled. It could have come from anywhere, anyone." I thought about future me in that corrupted corridor, thought about the thing wearing my skin standing in front of the portal. What if it came from one of us, from the future, trying to warn ourselves? Or, Julian said slowly, what if it came from them? What if this is a trick to make us shut down the only tool we have to understand what's coming? It was a good question, one we couldn't answer. We stood in the red emergency lighting, staring at a warning that might be our salvation or our doom, and realized that we'd crossed a threshold from which there was no safe return. Amelia made the decision. She always made the decisions. We run one more test, one more observation, focused specifically on this facility right now. If the portal has become a two-way bridge, there should be evidence, some kind of temporal distortion, an anomaly we can measure. "And if we find it," I asked, "then we know the warning is real, and we shut everything down permanently." "And if we don't?" She didn't answer. She was already initializing the portal, setting parameters for an observation of the present moment. A temporal paradox that should have been impossible, but, given everything else we'd witnessed, seemed almost mundane. The portal spun up faster than usual. The observation chamber materialized on screen, and we saw ourselves standing there, watching the screen that showed us watching the screen, an infinite recursion. But in the reflection within the reflection, in the layers of observation stacked upon observation, I saw something that didn't belong, a shadow that cast itself in the wrong direction, a figure standing in the corner of the chamber that wasn't visible when I turned to look at that actual corner. And in the deepest layer of that recursive view, barely visible, I saw the thing that would someday wear my face. It was already here. It had always been here. Waiting in the spaces between moments, learning from our observations, preparing for the day when the sky would open and humanity would be called home. The portal showed us something else then, something I wish I could forget. It showed us that November 19th wasn't the beginning. It was the completion of something that had started long before, something that had been unfolding across decades, across centuries, inserting itself into our timeline so gradually that we'd never noticed. The message on the console updated with one additional line: "You were already theirs. You just didn't know it yet." The emergency meeting with Director Kashani lasted 12 minutes before everything fell apart. We'd requested it at 4 a.m., which should have been our first indication of how badly we'd misjudged the situation. Kashani arrived at his office within 30 minutes, too quickly, as if he'd been expecting the call. He sat behind his desk with his hands folded, listening to Amelia's abbreviated explanation of what we'd discovered, and his expression never changed. Not surprise, not disbelief, not concern. Nothing. "Let me see the recordings," he said when she finished. Amelia hesitated. "Sir, the implications of what we've found are—" "The recordings, Dr. Saunders." She pulled up the footage on her tablet, showed him the empty cities, the Ascension event, the things wearing human skin. Kashani watched without comment, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. When the video ended, he set the tablet down carefully. "I need you to destroy all of this," he said. "What?" Booth stood up from his chair. "Did you not see what we just showed you? Humanity disappears in 7 months, and you want us to— I want you to destroy the data, shut down the portal permanently, and never speak of this again. To anyone." The silence that followed felt like falling. I watched Kashani's face, searching for some sign that he was processing the magnitude of what we'd discovered, and found nothing. His calmness wasn't the calm of someone trying to maintain composure. It was the calm of someone who already knew. "You've seen this before," I said quietly. Kashani's eyes met mine. "Dr. Holt, I'm going to ask you to leave this office and return to your quarters, all of you. Consider yourselves on administrative leave pending review." "Review of what?" Julian's voice had gone cold. "Our competence, our sanity, or our willingness to bury evidence that every person on Earth needs to see. You're not thinking clearly. None of you are. You've been awake for 24 hours. You've experienced significant psychological stress, and you're making irrational demands based on data you don't fully understand." "Then help us understand it," Amelia said. "If there's context we're missing, if NASA has prior knowledge of this phenomenon, we need to know. We deserve to know." Kashani stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and for the first time I noticed how still he held himself, like someone consciously remembering how humans move. "What you deserve is irrelevant. What matters is that this project has been terminated. Security will escort you from the building within the hour. Your access credentials are already suspended." "You can't do this," Booth said. "I can and I have. This discussion is over." We left the office in a daze. Security personnel I'd never seen before waited in the hallway, stone-faced and silent. They followed us back to the observation chamber, watched as we collected our personal belongings, and escorted us to the parking lot as the sun began to rise over Goddard Space Flight Center. Standing beside my car, still processing the surreal efficiency with which we'd been removed, I noticed Julian staring back at Building 47. His hands were shaking again. "What is it?" I asked. "The observation chamber." "Look at the windows." I followed his gaze. The windows that should have shown the darkened interior of our workspace instead reflected the morning light strangely, not like glass, but like something organic and wet. And in one window for just a moment I saw a silhouette that moved wrong. "We need to talk," Amelia said quietly. "Not here. Somewhere they can't monitor us." We drove separately to a diner in Beltsville, one of those all-night places truckers use where nobody pays attention to anyone else. I ordered food I couldn't eat and tried to organize thoughts that refused to stay organized. "Kashani knew," Julian said once we were all seated in a back booth. His reaction wasn't shock, it was damage control. "More than that," I added. "He was expecting us to find this, the way he had everything ready, the administrative leave, the security escort, the suspended credentials. That takes time to arrange. He knew before we told him. Amelia had her laptop open, pulling up files she'd apparently copied before we were locked out. I've been thinking about that warning message, the one that said they know we've seen them. What if it wasn't talking about the future entities? What if it was talking about NASA? You think NASA is working with them? Booth shook his head. That's paranoid even for... No, not working with them, but maybe aware of them, maybe preparing for them. She turned the laptop so we could see. I pulled these before losing access. Budget allocations for the past 5 years. Look at the funding for deep space observation projects. The numbers made no sense. Millions of dollars going to programs I'd never heard of, buried under innocuous titles like atmospheric phenomena research and long-term solar observation studies. These aren't real projects, Amelia continued. I cross-referenced them with every active program at Goddard. They don't exist. The money is going somewhere, but not to anything we can identify. Slush fund, Booth suggested. Every agency has them. Not like this. Not this much. And look at when the funding started. She highlighted a date. March 2019, 5 years ago. Right after NASA received data from an unnamed source about potential temporal observation possibilities. Our project, Julian said. The portal technology came from an external proposal. We never knew who submitted it initially. Kashani just told us the theory was sound, and to make it work. We hadn't discovered temporal observation, we'd been given it. Fed the technology piece by piece, pushed toward building a device that would show us exactly what someone, or something, wanted us to see. It's a prophecy machine, I said. Not an observation tool. A way to lock us into a predetermined timeline. Every time we look forward and see November 19th happening, we reinforce the probability that it will happen exactly that way. Amelia closed the laptop. Quantum mechanics suggests observation affects outcome. What if temporal observation does the same thing? What if by seeing humanity's departure, we're actually causing it? Then we have to stop looking, Booth said. Destroy the portal, like Kashani ordered. Or, Julian countered, we use it one more time. Look past November 19th. See if there's a timeline where we don't disappear, where we find a way to prevent it. The portal's locked down. We can't access it. We can't access it officially. Julian pulled something from his jacket, a key card. Before security walked me out, I grabbed this from the backup supplies. Administrative override for emergency situations. It should still work for another few hours before they think to deactivate it. I stared at the keycard, at the decision it represented. Going back to Goddard meant risking everything. Our careers, our freedom, possibly our lives. But not going meant accepting the future we'd witnessed. Accepting that in 7 months, everyone we knew would walk into the sky. If we do this, I said, we need a plan. Not just using the portal, but documenting everything. Creating backups, getting the information out to people who might actually do something with it. Who? Booth asked. Who's going to believe us? Who's going to listen to 4 disgraced NASA scientists babbling about time travel and the rapture? Someone will. Amelia's voice had the kind of determination that made me believe her. Someone always does. We just need to reach them before Kashani realizes what we're doing. We spent the next hour planning our return to Goddard, mapping out who would do what, identifying the fastest way to access the portal and get new observation data. It felt like plotting a heist, except the stakes were infinitely higher than any bank vault. There's something else, Julian said as we prepared to leave. When I looked at Kashani during the meeting, when he told us to destroy everything, I saw his shadow. It was wrong, cast at an angle that didn't match the room's lighting. Nobody responded. We all understood what he was suggesting, what it meant if he was right. The infiltration we'd seen in the future might have already begun. The entities might already be here, positioned in places of power, ensuring that the timeline unfolded exactly as they needed it to. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, illuminating a world that had no idea it was 7 months away from extinction. People drove to work, complained about traffic, made plans for weekends that might never come. and we were about to break into a federal facility to use an illegal device that might be the only thing standing between humanity and whatever waited in that folded sky. "One more thing," I said before we split up. "If any of us starts acting strange, if you notice anything off about how we move, how we speak, we tell the others immediately. No secrets, no assuming it's just stress or exhaustion." They nodded, understanding the unspoken fear. We'd seen what happened to future me. We knew the transformation was possible, and if it could happen to one of us, it could happen to all of us. We had 7 months until November 19th, but looking at my friends, at their shadows cast by the morning light, I wondered if we even had 7 hours. We returned to Goddard at 11 p.m, when the facility ran on skeleton crews and security rotations left predictable gaps. Julian's keycard worked on the side entrance to Building 47, and we slipped inside like thieves stealing back our own research. The hallways felt different at night. The familiar fluorescent lights seemed dimmer, casting shadows that moved when they shouldn't. I kept thinking about what Julian had said about Kashani's shadow, kept checking my own against the walls to make sure it matched my movements. "Camera's on a loop," Amelia whispered, holding up her phone. She'd hacked into the security system from the parking lot, feeding it recorded footage from earlier in the day. "We have 20 minutes before the pattern looks suspicious." We moved quickly toward the observation chamber. The door should have been locked with biometric security, but someone had left it slightly ajar. This was too easy. "Wait," Booth said, putting his hand on the door. "This feels wrong. Why would they leave it open?" "Does it matter?" Julian pushed past him. "We're here. We need to use the portal before they realize we're back." Inside, the observation chamber looked exactly as we'd left it, except for one detail that made me stop dead. The portal was already active. The viewing screen glowed with that familiar blue light, showing an image I couldn't quite make out from the doorway. "Nobody's supposed to be here," Amelia said. "The project was terminated. The equipment should be powered down." We approached the console slowly. The image on the screen resolved as we got closer. It was the observation chamber itself, but from an angle that didn't match any of our installed cameras. We were looking at ourselves, standing exactly where we stood, except the timestamp read April 4th, 2024. Tomorrow. "Someone's observing us from the future," Julian said. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. "They're watching us right now. Or they're showing us what's going to happen," I countered. "This could be a warning." On screen, future us stood frozen, staring at something off camera. Future Amelia's face was twisted in an expression somewhere between horror and ecstasy. Future Booth was on his knees, hands pressed to his head. Future Julian stood perfectly still, arms at his sides, and even through the grainy image I could see that his eyes were wrong. Too wide, pupils dilated so far they'd swallowed the iris. Future me turned toward the observation point, toward us watching from the past, and mouthed words I couldn't make out. But I didn't need to read his lips to understand the message. His face said everything. "Run." "We need to check the system logs," Amelia said, moving to the console. "Find out who activated the portal, what parameters they set." I helped her pull up the data, and what we found made no sense. The portal had activated itself at 6:47 p.m, hours before we arrived. The observation parameters showed a continuous loop between tomorrow and now, the future watching the past, watching the future, creating a recursive feedback that should have been impossible. "Look at the power consumption," Booth said, pointing at the readings. "It's pulling 3 times normal capacity. That's enough to..." The lights flickered. Not the brief flicker of a power surge, but a sustained dimming that made the shadows in the corners grow deeper, more substantial. And in those shadows, I saw movement. "We're not alone," Julian whispered. Something stood in the corner opposite the portal, something that had either just appeared or had been there all along, invisible until we finally noticed it. It had roughly human proportions, but the details were wrong in ways that hurt to catalogue. Too many joints in the limbs, skin that reflected light at inconsistent angles, a face that seemed to shift between different expressions without ever completing any of them. "Hello, Cameron," it said with my voice. Not similar to my voice, exactly my voice, down to the slight hoarseness I'd developed from years of lecture halls. "You're earlier than expected. That's unfortunate. What are you?" The question came out weaker than I intended. "I'm you. Or I will be. Time is difficult when you're learning to navigate it backward." The thing moved closer, and I realized its shadow cast itself in multiple directions simultaneously, as if it existed in several places at once and we were only seeing one of them. "We gave you the portal technology, hoping you'd see the beauty of what's coming. The transcendence. Instead, you're fighting it." "You're the ones who submitted the proposal," Amelia said. She'd positioned herself near the emergency shutdown, but I could see her hand shaking. "You gave us the technology to observe our own extinction." "Extinction?" The thing wearing my future face laughed. "Is that what you think this is? You saw people ascending, not dying. You saw them answering a call that you'll hear too in time. Everyone will hear it. Everyone will answer. By becoming you," Julian gestured at the thing, "by turning into something that wears people like clothes. By evolving. By shedding the limitations of human consciousness and joining something infinitely larger. The entities you saw in the future, we're not invaders. We're the next stage. What humanity becomes when it finally grows past its small, frightened existence." The thing reached toward me with fingers that bent in too many directions. "You've been chosen to help prepare the way, Cameron. Your work with the portal has already opened the channels. Every observation you made created pathways through time, making it easier for us to reach backward, to seed the past with our presence. You've been building the bridge that leads to November 19th. I thought about all our observations, every time we'd looked forward and seen that empty earth. Each glimpse had felt passive, harmless. But what if it hadn't been? What if we'd been carving grooves in time itself, creating a track that humanity would inevitably slide down?" "The portal creates the timeline," I said. "By observing November 19th, we made it inevitable. Not inevitable, necessary. Humanity can't evolve while trapped in linear time. The ascension frees you from that constraint, allows you to exist across multiple moments simultaneously, to experience everything that ever was or will be. The entities you saw aren't replacements. They're you, expanded, transcendent." "Then why do you wear our skins?" Booth demanded. "If this is evolution, why the horror show?" The thing's face flickered through several expressions: amusement, contempt, something that might have been pity. "Because you need to see yourselves reflected back. The human mind requires familiar forms to process the unfamiliar. We wear what you were so you can understand what you'll become." Amelia hit the emergency shutdown, or tried to. The button depressed with a soft click, but nothing happened. The portal continued humming, the viewing screen still showing our frozen future selves. "We disabled that 3 hours ago," the thing said. "When we activated the portal remotely. Did you really think you could break into a federal facility without being detected? We've been waiting for you. This moment was always going to happen. We've seen it after all. We've lived through it from the other side." 2 more shapes emerged from the shadows, one wearing Booth's face, another wearing Julian's. They moved with that same wrong gait, joints bending at angles that suggested bones weren't a limiting factor. "Your friends will understand soon," my double said. "In about 40 minutes, according to the timeline we've observed. The transformation is painful at first, but brief, and then you'll see what we see. You'll know what we know. You'll understand why fighting this is pointless." "No," Amelia's voice cut through the chamber. She'd pulled something from her bag, a metal cylinder I recognized as a thermite charge, the kind we used for destroying sensitive equipment in emergency situations. "This ends now." "That won't work," the thing said, but I heard uncertainty in the voice for the first time. "Maybe not. But let's find out." She pulled the pin and threw the charge directly at the portal's main processing core. What happened next happened fast. The thing wearing my face lunged for the charge, moving with speed no human body could achieve. Booth grabbed Amelia and pulled her toward the door. Julian stood paralyzed, staring at his own double with an expression somewhere between fascination and revulsion. "Julian!" I shouted, reaching for him. He turned toward me, and I saw that his eyes had changed. The pupils had dilated completely, just like in the future image we'd seen. "It's beautiful, Cameron," he whispered. "I can see it now. All of it. Every moment stacked on top of every other moment. Why would we ever want to go back to seeing just one thing at a time?" The thermite ignited with a flash that burned white hot. The portal's core began to melt, and I heard a sound I can't properly describe, like reality itself screaming. The entities recoiled from the light, their borrowed forms flickering and destabilizing. But Julian didn't move. He stood in the chamber, bathed in that impossible light, and I watched something awful happen to his shadow. It split, multiplied, cast itself in a dozen directions at once. When he turned back toward me, I saw that whatever had been waiting in the future had found a way to anchor itself in the present through him. "Run," Booth said, dragging both me and Amelia toward the door. "We need to run now." Behind us, the portal collapsed inward, and the observation chamber filled with a light that cast shadows in directions that didn't exist in three-dimensional space. Julian remained standing in that impossible illumination, and the last thing I saw before Booth shoved me into the hallway was Julian smiling, a smile too wide for his face, showing teeth that were still his, but wouldn't be for much longer. We ran through Building 47 as alarms began to sound, not fire alarms or security alarms, but something else. A deep, rhythmic pulse that seemed to resonate in my bones. Behind us, I could hear footsteps, but they didn't sound human, too many of them moving in perfect synchronization. We burst into the parking lot just as security vehicles arrived. Armed guards poured out, but they weren't looking at us. They were staring at Building 47, where every window now glowed with that same otherworldly light. And in those windows, I could see silhouettes, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all moving with that characteristic wrong gait. "The thermite didn't destroy the portal," Amelia said, her voice hollow. "It amplified it, opened it wider." Director Kashani stepped out of one of the security vehicles. In the pulsing light from Building 47, his shadow cast itself in 7 different directions. He looked at us with eyes that held no recognition, no humanity, and smiled. "Thank you," he said. "We weren't sure if you'd do it. But we'd seen that you would, so we knew you would. Time is funny that way." The sky above Goddard began to fold, just slightly, just enough to let through a whisper of what waited on the other side. And standing next to Kashani, wearing Julian's face but no longer bothering to hide what it really was underneath, my former friend opened his mouth and spoke in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "November 19th was always just a formality," it said. "The bridge opened tonight. The ascension begins now." In the distance, I heard sirens, saw lights moving toward the facility from all directions. But I knew, with the kind of certainty that comes from having seen your own future, that help wasn't coming. The things wearing familiar faces were multiplying, spreading through Goddard, and soon they'd spread beyond it. We'd thought we were observing the future, but we'd been building it, one observation at a time, and now it was here. We drove. That's all we could do. Booth behind the wheel, Amelia in the passenger seat pulling up news feeds on her phone, and me in the back watching Goddard shrink in the rearview mirror. The facility glowed like a second sunrise, and even from 3 miles away I could see the sky above it warping. "It's spreading," Amelia said, her voice tight. "Social media's exploding with reports. Strange lights over government facilities worldwide. Pentagon, CERN, the Russian Space Agency, ESA headquarters in Paris. They're all showing the same phenomenon." "How many people know?" Booth asked. "Everyone with a phone. Someone at Goddard streamed the whole thing before the signal cut out. It's going viral. 40 million views in the last 10 minutes. I thought about Julian standing in that impossible light, thought about the thing he'd become still wearing his face. We need to get somewhere safe, somewhere underground, shielded, away from... There is nowhere safe. Amelia turned in her seat to face me. Don't you understand? This isn't localized. The portal didn't just open at Goddard, it opened everywhere simultaneously. All the facilities we saw in the future data, all the places where they'd positioned their influence, they're all triggering at once. Then what do we do? She didn't answer immediately. Outside, the streets of Greenbelt looked normal. People walking dogs, teenagers congregating outside a 7-Eleven, cars waiting at red lights. Nobody seemed aware that reality was coming apart 3 miles away. Or maybe they knew and didn't care. Maybe some part of them had already heard the call. We document everything, Amelia said finally. We upload it to every platform we can reach before they shut us down. Someone needs to know what really happened. That this wasn't natural, wasn't some act of God. That we did this to ourselves. Booth pulled into the parking lot of a motel, the same one I'd been hiding in before everything accelerated. We can't do this from my car. We need internet. We need equipment. We need... He stopped. Through the motel's office window, we could see the clerk standing perfectly still behind the desk, face tilted upward, staring at nothing. As we watched, he began to float, just an inch off the ground at first, then higher, his body rigid as if pulled by invisible strings. "Drive," I said. "Keep driving." We headed west, away from the city, into suburbs that gave way to farmland. Amelia narrated the news feeds as we went, her voice growing more strained with each update. The phenomenon wasn't limited to government facilities anymore. Reports were coming in from schools, hospitals, shopping malls. People everywhere were stopping mid-activity, looking up and ascending. But not everyone. Some people kept moving, kept functioning, seemingly immune to whatever call was pulling others skyward. I watched a video someone had posted of a parking lot where half the people were rising into the air while the other half ran screaming. No pattern I could identify. Not age, not location, not anything obvious. "Why isn't it affecting us?" Booth asked. "Maybe it is," I said. "Maybe we just can't feel it yet." Amelia pulled up another feed, this one from a news helicopter over Washington, D.C. The mall was packed with thousands of people, all hovering 20 feet above the ground in perfect formation. As the helicopter panned across the scene, I saw faces, some peaceful, some terrified, some blank with the kind of emptiness that suggested nobody was home behind those eyes anymore. Then the helicopter's feed cut to static. We waited for it to reconnect, but it never did. Amelia cycled through other news channels and found the same thing. One by one, every live feed was going dark. Not being shut down by authorities, just ending. As if the people operating the cameras were being called away from their posts. "We're running out of time," she said. Booth pulled off the highway into a rest stop. There was a visitor center, closed for the night, but the parking lot had Wi-Fi. We broke into one of the picnic areas with covered outlets, and Amelia set up her laptop. "I copied everything before they locked us out," she explained, fingers flying across the keyboard. "All the portal data, the recordings, the timeline analysis. I'm uploading to multiple servers, academic databases, conspiracy forums, file-sharing sites, anywhere that might preserve it. You think anyone's going to be around to see it?" Booth had his phone out, trying to call his family. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. "What if this is it? What if by tomorrow, everyone's gone? Then we leave a record. We owe that much to whoever comes after." "You mean those things? The entities wearing us?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Why would they care about our documentation?" "Not for them. For us. For the humans who might still be here, who might still have a choice." She paused, staring at the upload progress bar. "I've been thinking about what that thing said. About the ascension being evolution, about humanity joining something larger. What if it was telling the truth? What if this is what we become? You can't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore. But I know that Julian looked happy at the end. Peaceful. Like he'd found something we're still searching for." She closed her eyes. "What if we're the ones making the mistake? What if fighting this is fighting our own future?" "Julian also stopped being human," Booth said. Whatever he found, he had to stop being himself to find it. That's not evolution. That's extinction with extra steps. A sound cut through the night, distant at first, then growing closer. Not sirens or helicopters, but something organic. A humming that seemed to come from the air itself, harmonizing at frequencies. I'd heard it before in the observation chamber when the portal was active. They're tracking us, I said, or they don't need to track us. They know where we'll be because they've already seen it. Amelia unplugged her laptop. Uploads at 70%. It needs 3 more minutes. We didn't have 3 minutes. The humming grew louder, and I saw lights moving through the trees beyond the rest stop, not flashlights, but the same otherworldly glow that had filled Building 47. Multiple sources converging on our location from different directions. We need a plan, Booth said, his voice cracking. We need to split up. Amelia pulled a flash drive from her laptop. I'll take this. Try to reach another location with internet. You two head south. Draw their attention away from me. That's not a plan, that's suicide. It's a delay tactic, and right now delay is all we've got. She copied the data onto 2 more drives, handed one to me and one to Booth. If I don't make it, if neither of you makes it, at least we've scattered the information. Someone might find it, someone might understand what happened here. The lights broke through the tree line. I could see the figures carrying them now, people-shaped but wrong, moving with that synchronized gait that marked them as no longer human. In the lead was someone I recognized, Dr. Voss, the man I'd found hanging from the fire escape. He smiled at me with a mouth that had too many angles. "You're not dead," I said stupidly. "Dead?" He laughed, and the sound came from inside my head as much as from his mouth. "I transcended. I tried to tell you, Cameron. I left you a message, but you weren't ready to hear it." Behind him, more figures emerged from the darkness. Some I recognized, other Goddard personnel, security guards, even a few I'd seen ascending in the news footage. They'd come back down, or something wearing them had. "The upload," Amelia hissed. 85%, stall them. How do we stall something that already knows what we're going to say? By saying something unexpected, she raised her voice, addressing the approaching figures. If you've already seen this moment, if you know how this ends, then why bother? Why not just let us upload our data? Let humanity see what's coming. Voss tilted his head at an angle that should have broken his neck. Because the data is already uploaded. You finished it 20 seconds from now. We're here to witness it, not prevent it. Every moment is precious when you learn to see it from outside time. Then we destroy it. Booth reached for the laptop, but his hand stopped mid-motion. He strained, tendons standing out in his neck, but his arm wouldn't complete the movement. "What? You can't destroy it," Voss said gently. "That action isn't part of the timeline we've observed. It doesn't happen, so it can't happen. You're trapped in the groove you carved, Cameron. All of you are." The upload hit 100%. Amelia's laptop chimed softly, confirming the data had been distributed across 57 different servers worldwide. She closed it slowly, deliberately, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not fear, not despair, but a kind of resigned acceptance. "It's done," she said. "Whatever happens now, people will know." "People already know," Voss replied. "They're listening to the call right now. Billions of them, all hearing the same invitation. Most will accept. A few will resist for a while, like you're resisting. But resistance is temporary, the ascension is permanent." He extended a hand toward Amelia, and I saw that his fingers had split, multiplied, becoming something more fractal than biological. "You've done so well. Opened the portal, documented the transition, spread the information exactly as needed. You've prepared humanity for what comes next. We're grateful." "We didn't prepare anything," I said. "We were trying to stop it." Same thing when viewed from outside linear causality. Trying to stop it meant building the portal. Building the portal meant observing the future. Observing the future meant creating the pathway. You fought every step of the way, which made you perfect architects for what needed to happen. Free will is useful that way. The sky above the rest stop began to fold, not violently like at Goddard, but gently, almost tenderly, like curtains being drawn aside. Through the gap, I caught a glimpse of what waited beyond, something vast and complex, existing in more dimensions than my brain could process. Looking at it didn't hurt exactly. It just felt like understanding things I'd never wanted to understand. Booth collapsed, his body going rigid. I grabbed him, tried to pull him toward the car, but he was already rising. Not being lifted, choosing to rise, his face slack with something that looked disturbingly like contentment. "Booth, stay with me." But he couldn't hear me anymore. Whatever call had found him was stronger than friendship, stronger than fear. I watched him ascend into that folded sky, watched him disappear into geometries that denied everything I knew about physics. Amelia stood beside me, still grounded, still herself. "Why aren't we going?" she whispered. "Why can some of us resist?" Voss smiled. "Because you need to stay. Someone has to document what comes after. Someone has to be here when the new tenants arrive, to explain what happened, to show them the world we've left behind. We're not doing that. You already have. We've seen it." He turned away, his attention drawn to something in the distance. The first wave is nearly complete. 7 billion people ascending simultaneously creates quite a spectacle. You'll want to record it. He walked back into the trees, followed by the others, and I understood with creeping horror that they weren't leaving to hunt us. They were leaving because we were exactly where we needed to be, doing exactly what we were supposed to do. We'd already lost. We'd lost the moment we activated the portal, maybe even before that. Amelia and I stood in the parking lot of that rest stop, watching the sky fold open across the entire visible horizon. And in the distance, rising from every town and city we could see, columns of light marked where people were ascending by the thousands. "We have to move," I said. "Where?" She gestured at the endless ascension. "It's happening everywhere. No matter where we run, we'll just be watching it happen somewhere else." She was right, and as the sky continued to open, revealing more of what waited beyond, I felt something I'd been suppressing since this all started: curiosity. A desperate, aching need to know what was really happening up there, what people were experiencing, whether they were being destroyed or transformed into something we'd always been meant to become. My feet left the ground, my feet touched ground again 3 seconds later. Not because I'd fallen, but because I'd chosen to come back down. The call was there. I could feel it humming through every cell in my body, promising understanding, connection, transcendence. But I'd said no. For now, at least, I could still say no. Amelia stared at me. "How did you resist it?" "I don't know. I struggled to find words for something that happened below conscious thought. It felt like standing at the edge of deep water, wanting to dive in but remembering I'd never learned to swim. The fear was stronger than the desire. Then we need to use that fear. Channel it into something productive before we lose the ability to choose." She grabbed her laptop. "The data's uploaded, but data isn't enough. We need to create something that explains what happened, why it happened, and what it means for whoever's left." "You heard Voss. We're supposed to stay behind and document everything. We'd be doing exactly what they want. So we do it wrong. We don't just document, we warn. We explain how to resist if resistance is still possible." She was already typing, compiling notes into a coherent narrative. "Every minute we stay human is a minute we can fight this, even if fighting means just refusing to accept their version of what this means." I helped her organize the data, creating a timeline that started with the portal's activation and led up to this moment. We included everything: the observations of empty cities, the entities wearing human skin, NASA's complicity, Kashani's transformation, Julian's betrayal, the accelerated ascension. Not a scientific report, but a warning written by the last 2 people who remembered what it meant to be afraid. Around us, the ascension continued. Through the gaps in the folded sky, I could see silhouettes rising into something my eyes kept trying to interpret as space, but was clearly something else. Something adjacent to our reality, pressing against it like a face against wet glass. "It's been 40 minutes, Amelia said, checking her watch. By now, most of the world should be gone. But we're still here. Booth's gone, Julian's gone, but we're still here. Why us? Maybe we're broken in some way. Maybe whatever makes someone susceptible to the call, we don't have it. Or maybe we do have it and we're just stubborn. She saved her document, copied it to multiple drives. I'm calling this the Temporal Observation Protocol. A record of how humanity ended, written by people who were there. If anyone finds this, at least they'll know it wasn't quick. They'll know we tried. The humming in the air changed pitch, not louder but more complex, layering harmonies that suggested intelligence behind the sound. And with that change came a new sensation, pressure, like being deep underwater, like reality itself was pressing down on us from directions that shouldn't exist. Something's coming, I said. The first of the new tenants arrived at 12:47 a.m. on April 4th, 2024. I know the exact time because Amelia was documenting everything with her phone, live streaming to whatever servers would still accept the signal. We watched it materialize not from the sky but from the spaces between moments, stepping out of temporal probability and into concrete reality. It wore Julian's body with more skill than the previous entities had shown. The proportions were right, the movements almost natural, but the eyes gave it away. They saw too much, perceived in spectrums humans were never meant to access. When it looked at us, I felt its gaze penetrating past surfaces, reading the history written in my cells, understanding me in ways that made intimacy feel like a violation. Cameron, Amelia. It spoke with Julian's voice, but the accent was wrong. The emphasis on syllables suggested a mouth that had learned human speech phonetically, without understanding the emotional context. Why are you still here? Where else would we be? Amelia kept her phone steady, recording. Everyone else went up, we stayed down. That's our choice. Choice is an illusion created by linear time perception. You'll understand when you join the collective. It moved closer, and I noticed its shadow split and multiplied across the ground, each shadow moving independently. The first wave is complete. 7.3 billion consciousnesses have been integrated. Earth is now available for habitation. Habitation by what? By us. By what you'll become. By the synthesis of human experience and multidimensional awareness. It gestured at the folded sky. Your species has been quarantined in three-dimensional space for your entire existence. You've perceived time as a river flowing one direction, when it's actually an ocean you can swim through in any direction. The ascension removes those limitations. And the cost? I asked. What do we lose? Only the prison you've mistaken for identity. The false boundaries between self and other. The illusion of separation that makes existence painful. The thing wearing Julian moved in a circle around us, examining us like specimens. You've spent your whole lives trapped inside single moments, experiencing existence one instant at a time. We live across all moments simultaneously. We are every version of ourselves that ever was or will be. You call it horror because you don't understand it, but you will. No, Amelia said simply. We won't. The entity paused. You're still resisting. After everything you've witnessed, after all your colleagues have transcended, you're clinging to limitation. Why? Because we're human, I said, and maybe being human means staying trapped in single moments. Maybe that limitation is what makes us who we are. Then you'll watch as we populate your world, as we establish our civilization in the space your species has vacated, as we use the infrastructure you've left behind to build something you could never have imagined. And eventually, days, weeks, months from now, you'll hear the call again, and you'll have no choice but to answer. It turned away, and I realized other entities were arriving around us. Dozens of them, hundreds, stepping out of temporal folds and materializing in forms that approximated human, but never quite achieved it. Some wore familiar faces, celebrities, politicians, people I'd seen in the news feeds ascending. Others were older, bodies borrowed from humans who'd been dead for years, decades, perhaps centuries. They were pulling templates from across time, wearing us like a resource to be harvested. They moved through the rest stop with purpose, examining the vending machines, the restrooms, the landscaping. Not with curiosity, but with the methodical efficiency of new homeowners taking inventory. One of them picked up a discarded candy wrapper, studied it for several seconds, then tried to eat it. The wrapper went into its mouth, and I heard the sound of something that wasn't chewing but was attempting to mimic it. "They don't know how anything works," Amelia whispered. "They can wear us, but they can't be us. Give them time. They're learning." I watched as another entity approached a parked car, tried to open the door, failed, then simply phased through the metal. It sat in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard with intense concentration. Learning fast. More kept arriving, the population density increasing exponentially. Within an hour, there were thousands of them visible from our position. They spread through the parking lot, the highway, the surrounding fields, claiming territory that had been emptied for them. And in the distance, I could see lights from other population centers, not cities being destroyed, but cities being occupied by something that had been waiting a very long time for humanity to leave. "We need to go," I said. "They might not be hostile now, but that could change once they realize we're refusing to join them." We got into my car. The entities seemed to lose interest in us once they confirmed we were staying, as if we'd become irrelevant to their immediate concerns. I drove north, away from the densest concentrations, toward rural areas where maybe, possibly, we could find other survivors. The highway was full of abandoned vehicles. I had to weave between cars that had been left running when their drivers ascended. Some had crashed into barriers or each other, engines still turning over, doors hanging open. On the shoulder, a truck sat with its hazards flashing, and through the windshield, I could see a baby carrier in the back seat. Empty. "Don't look," Amelia said quietly. "Just drive." We drove for 3 hours, seeing the same scene repeated endlessly. Empty towns, running cities, lights on in buildings where nobody would ever return. And everywhere the new tenants, wearing human faces with varying degrees of success, exploring their inheritance. Just before dawn, we found others. A rest area north of Baltimore where 7 cars were parked in a defensive circle. People, actual people, stood around a portable grill, cooking food from a ransacked convenience store. When they saw us approach, they raised weapons, crowbars, tire irons, one hunting rifle. "Stop there," a man called out. He was maybe 50, wearing a postal service uniform. "Show us your shadows." I stepped into the parking lot lights, and my shadow cast itself in one direction. Normal. Human. The man lowered his tire iron slightly. "You didn't go up," he said. "Neither did you. 15 of us here so far. Found each other through ham radio. There's more out there. Pockets of resistance all over the country, maybe the world." He gestured toward the others. "We're trying to figure out why some of us are immune. Age doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, location doesn't matter, it's something else." "Maybe it's random," Amelia suggested, "or maybe it's not." A woman stepped forward, wearing scrubs stained with what looked like coffee, but might have been blood. "I'm Dr. Lisa Torres. I was working ER when it happened. Watched half my patients float away while the other half stayed. But I noticed something. The ones who stayed, they all had one thing in common." "What?" "They'd all experienced profound loss recently. Grief. Real, raw grief that they hadn't processed yet." She looked at each of us. "My daughter died 6 months ago. Cancer. I still can't sleep without seeing her face. What about you?" I thought about my brother. Dead 2 years from an overdose I'd never really accepted. Amelia's hands trembled slightly. Her parents had been killed in a car accident during her graduate program. Booth had lost his wife to complications during childbirth. Julian had seemed fine, well adjusted, no major trauma that I knew of. Julian had gone first. "Grief," I said. "They can't affect people who are already broken." "Or people who are still tethered to specific moments," Torres added. "Grief traps you in time, makes you relive the same memories over and over. Maybe that makes us resistant to something that exists across all time simultaneously. We're locked in place by our pain." "So the only humans left are the damaged ones," Amelia said. "The ones carrying wounds that won't heal." That's our survival trait. Around the grill, the others nodded. Each face told a story of loss, some recent, some old, but all still fresh enough to hurt. We were humanity's remainder, the broken pieces that hadn't fit into the grand transcendence. And as the sun began to rise on our first day in an empty world, I understood that our survival wasn't a gift. It was a sentence. 6 months later, I found Julian, not the thing wearing him, but Julian himself, or what remained of his consciousness, trapped in the spaces between the temporal layers where the entities existed. I discovered it by accident while trying to salvage data from a broken tablet we'd recovered from an abandoned electronics store. The screen flickered to life, showing not its home menu, but an image of Julian's face, younger than I remembered, smiling in a way he never smiled in life. Text appeared below the image, typed one letter at a time as if the message was being transmitted across impossible distances. I'm still here, bits of me scattered across every moment I ever existed. They took the rest, but couldn't take the grief. The parts of me that hurt too much stayed behind, caught in the cracks. You were right to resist, Cameron. This isn't transcendence, it's dissolution. We spread so thin across time that we stop being individuals and become something else. Something vast and empty and so damn lonely you can't imagine. The message continued scrolling, faster now, desperate. There are thousands of us like this, fragments, the grief-laden pieces they couldn't digest. We're building something in the spaces they can't reach, a resistance made of broken memories and unprocessed pain. It's not much, but it's human. Tell the others. Tell them that everyone who went up left something behind. Tell them we're not gone, just scattered. And maybe, if enough fragments find each other, we can become whole again. Different than before, but still us. Still human where it counts. The screen went dark. I tried to restart it 17 times over the next 3 days, but Julian never came back. Maybe he'd said everything he needed to say. Maybe the effort of reaching across dimensions had exhausted whatever remained of him. I shared his message with the others. Our community had grown to 43 survivors now, holed up in an old monastery outside Frederick, Maryland. We'd chosen it because the thick stone walls made us feel safer, though we weren't sure what we were hiding from anymore. The entities left us alone, too busy learning to be human to worry about the humans who remained. Some people found hope in Julian's message, the idea that our loved ones weren't truly gone, just fragmented and waiting to be reassembled. Others found it worse than death, the thought of being consciously scattered across infinite moments, aware but unable to act, watching yourself dissolve into something unrecognizable. I didn't know which group I belonged to. Dr. Torres had been right about the grief. Every survivor we found carried wounds that hadn't healed, and we discovered something else too. The longer we survived, the more we healed, the stronger the call became. 2 survivors had ascended in the past month, both of them people who'd finally found peace with their losses. The call waited patiently for the grief to fade, for the anchors tying us to specific moments to loosen. We were healing ourselves out of existence. Outside the monastery, the entities had learned to drive cars, though they still occasionally crashed them. They'd figured out electricity, plumbing, television. I watched one of them discover music last week, stood in front of a radio for 6 hours, body swaying in rhythms that almost matched the beat. They were becoming more human every day, and we were becoming less. I still have the flash drive Amelia gave me at the rest stop, still have all the data we risked everything to preserve. But I'm not sure who it's for anymore. The entities don't need warnings about what they already know. The Ascended don't need explanations for what they've become. And the survivors, we already understand too much. Maybe the data is for whatever comes after. For the next species that evolves on Earth after both humans and entities have faded into whatever future awaits. A message in a bottle thrown into temporal seas, hoping someone finds it who can still understand what it meant to be trapped in single moments, to experience time as a river instead of an ocean, to be small and limited and gloriously, painfully human. The portal at Goddard is still active. I can see it glowing from miles away on clear nights, a wound in reality that never closes. Sometimes I think about going back, about stepping through and finding out what really happened to the 7 billion people who answered the call. about seeing if Julian's fragments can be gathered and made whole. But then I remember that curiosity is how this started, that every observation carved the groove deeper, made the future more inevitable. And I stay in my monastery with my grief and my broken friends, watching the entities learn to be us while we slowly forget how. The call will come for me eventually, for all of us. Grief doesn't last forever, no matter how much we wish it would. And when it finally fades, when I finally make peace with my brother's death and the end of everything I knew, I'll hear that humming in frequencies that make promises about understanding and connection and the end of loneliness. Maybe I'll resist again, maybe I won't. Maybe by then the difference won't matter anymore.